This is the Chris Stigall Show podcast.
Okay, guys, let's just rip. And Chris Stigall.
Chris Stigall. Chris, thanks for being with me tonight.
Chris Stigall.
I'm joined now by Chris Stigall.
Now, he puts the broad in broadband. It's Chris Stigall.
The Chris Stigall podcast is presented by usmedicalplan.com. Save big money monthly and get better health coverage at usmedicalplan.com.
Well, hey there, it's Good Friday. It's April 7th. I thank you so much for downloading the Chris Stigall Show podcast. I took a couple of days away from the radio show, but you podcast folks, I never want to leave you in a lurch. So a couple of interviews this week that you didn't get to hear if you weren't listening to the radio anyway. Dr. Sebastian Gorka, Ed Morrissey from Hot Air, Colonel Kurt Schlichter is a little delirious from waking up at 5 o'clock West Coast time to talk with me, and a little cantankerous too, and our chief economist, Steve Moore. Some great conversations, some great American gentlemen to round out the week. I hope you have a very blessed Easter weekend. I am so grateful that you listen, and I am so grateful to John Ruhlman, who helps make this podcast possible each and every day. John and the team at usmedicalplan.com. Go to that website today and save yourself some money on health insurance premiums. If you buy your own health insurance, if you are a retired senior on a fixed income, we're talking about saving potentially hundreds of dollars a month. For those of you that buy your own family's health insurance, my gosh, we're talking about maybe thousands of dollars a month. I know a personal friend who has called and saved nearly $2,000 a month after taking his daughter, who had some special health concerns. She had her own health care plan. Then there were 3 more he bought a separate plan for in the family. John and his team were able to get him cheaper rates and better coverage for all 4 of the family. I have heard this from numerous people. I've heard this from small business owners who cover insurance for their employees. Even if you buy your insurance through work, maybe you can get a cheaper plan. I'll bet you anything, if you're a younger, healthier person, you can get dirt cheap coverage, even coverage that could pay you if you end up being hospitalized, heaven forbid. So there's really great insurance out there for otherwise healthy people. U.S. Medical Plan in particular makes sense for you. 877-410-4321. 877-410-4321 or usmedicalplan.com. Catch my entire conversation right now at chrisstigall.com. I talked with John for like 30, 40 minutes, so you can get a sense of who he is and the kind of stuff he does. The whole conversation, chrisstigall.com. I didn't bring my friend Ed Morrissey on today to discuss this, but I thought he would be the perfect guy to kind of noodle this over a little bit before we get into what he's written about that interested me today. And that is, as we talk about the Trump indictment today, I was thinking, I said to Eddie here during the break, Ed, and by the way, welcome in. Good morning, first of all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Remember the chance of lock her up?
Yes.
Do you remember the heart palpitations and the swooning and the outrageous nature that so many in traditional media thought of that? Maybe even some Republicans did. In fact, I pulled a story, July 2016. Do lock her up chants mark a new low? And I just started looking up the era of lock her up. Hillary Clinton, I'm very sad about the lock her up chant. Scott Pelley, are you threatened by the lock her up chant? Remember all the deal they made about lock her up chanting? Which brings me to today. Yeah. Which brings me to today.
I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, indeed. You know, we couldn't possibly charge Hillary Clinton with the several felonies that she actually committed by hiding an email system, an unauthorized email system, passing classified material through it, and lying about it to investigators. We couldn't possibly charge her with that. Goodness no, that would be upsetting the norms, Chris.
I remember July of that year so well. People, Michael Beschloss said yesterday, we will remember where we were when Trump was. No, we won't. But I will remember the day that James Comey came out in the press conference and laid out what sounded like a laundry list of reasons Hillary Clinton should be locked up. And then he ended it by saying, but we don't think she meant to do it, so we're good. Remember that?
No harm, no foul. Even though all that classified material that passed through that email server probably is in Beijing and Moscow at the moment, no harm, no foul.
Do you remember listening?
Even though her State Department lied to court after court after court on FOIA demands that The secretary has no email system. There's nothing to produce. Yeah, no worries.
Even
No
though she
harm, no
destroyed
foul.
the evidence, they just smashed BlackBerries. No big deal. No biggie.
biggie.
Yeah. No, it's like, and again, I know people say, well, that's just whataboutism. No, it's not. It's like literally our justice system determined her felonious activity wasn't worthy of prosecuting because she was a presidential candidate. That was ultimately what they concluded, yes?
Yes, that's ultimately what they concluded. And at the time, the media was like, well, chin stroking. Well, this may be a little uncomfortable down the road, but this is probably the right decision because we don't want to get prosecutions mixed up in politics. And
Yeah.
7 years later,
It's really remarkable how things have changed. I think it's worthy. It's just, to me, when you hear Biden and Clinton voters without a hint of irony in their voice say, no one is above the law. I mean, I nearly choke on my coffee.
yes. And now it's, how do you know he's a witch? Oh, burn him anyway. Burn him anyway.
How do you think this ultimately ends, Ed Morrissey? How do you think this plays out ultimately?
I think it gets thrown out. This indictment, at least from how it's been laid out in the New York Times, which is now scolding everybody who's making assumptions. Don't believe our reporting. You don't know what's in the indictment. And also laid out by the two prosecutors who resigned in protest when Alvin Bragg wouldn't bring the case the first time because it was such a lame case. From what we know, this is a house of cards. It's these counts are being stacked so they can make them felonies. But all of this stuff is well past the statute of limitations. Even if you make an allowance for Donald Trump being in the White House and can't be indicted by prosecutors. And by the way, that only really applies to federal prosecutors. That's a Department of Justice policy. It doesn't apply to the state of New York. Just common sense would apply, in that sort of sense. But apparently that's no longer in play in the state of New York. But even if you make those allowances, it's been 2 years since he left office. They haven't done anything about it. I mean, the judge is going to look at this and go, you're seriously going to build a case for a felony for somebody who used his own money to pay off an alleged paramour with an NDA and logged it as a business expense. All right, maybe that's his bad, but this is pretty ticky-tack stuff, even for a misdemeanor. I think this gets tossed out. If it doesn't get tossed out today, because the attorneys are saying we're going to file all sorts of motions today, including selective prosecution, including motions to dismiss. And if that doesn't work today, then I suspect that they're immediately going to take those issues up to the appellate court and make those cases there. I don't think this is ever going to trial. I think, though, that Donald Trump wants to play this out as long as possible so that he can get the most political bang for his buck out of it. But I don't think this ever goes to trial.
If what they say is true, I mean, I don't know. Okay, we don't have access to it, but I mean, we hear Donald Trump has raised $8 million since indictment day on Thursday. Which is, there's that. And then, as I've said since the last couple of weeks, a Trump mugshot becomes the single greatest fundraising moment in the history of presidential fundraisers, does it not? That's on every T-shirt and mug, and I mean, that's like the Sinatra, Johnny Cash mugshot.
It does, but I think they've already made arrangements so they're not going to do a mugshot.
Is that right?
Yesterday, yeah, okay. I saw that yesterday. They're in negotiating terms for a voluntary surrender is what it's called, and so he'll appear in the police station or the district attorney's office. They'll go through the booking process, but my understanding is that they're not going to do a mugshot. I mean, because why? What's the point? It's Donald Trump.
They're not going to process him like a typical. Okay, yeah, right.
You're going to put him on a wanted poster. You're going to be. I think that people can figure out. I think they can find something in the file about Donald Trump. He's been a pretty quiet guy in the city of New York for the last 40 years or so. So maybe they don't have a picture of him around. This is a guy who dove in front of practically every camera in the city of New York. So yeah, I don't think they really need a mugshot.
Really, in all sincerity, is this not just a terribly... I mean, I know this audience is. I've said to some friends of mine over dinner this weekend, I said, I can feel it, just because after having done this long enough, I can feel it in this audience. I can feel it, I think, in most of the country. There is a sense, no matter what you think of this man, there is something terribly dark and different about this moment than anything we've ever experienced in American politics.
Oh, yeah. You don't have to support Donald Trump to look at this and say it's wrong. And it is wrong, and we should say it's wrong. It's wrong. And I mean, I'm not saying that because I think it helps Donald Trump. I'm not saying because it hurts Donald Trump. I'm saying it because it's wrong. This is ridiculous prosecution. Now, are there other things that might come up that might be a little bit more substantial? Maybe. I mean, that thing in Fulton County, because he called Brad Raffensperger, that could be a little bit more substantial. And whatever the special counsel is, special counsels spend 5 years soaking up money and then coming up with a couple of process crimes for people on the fringes of whatever the case is. So I don't expect a whole lot of the special counsel. But I mean, it's possible that there's something more substantial down the road. This is not it. This is a desperation move.
And I know in the judicial system, the court of public opinion doesn't amount to much. But if this is where they start, it's only going to get. I mean, as far as the public is concerned, like I can see why people in Fulton County, Georgia, or why this January 6th bunch in Washington, why they're irritated with Bragg. They're like, dude, we can't lead.
Yeah.
I mean, Van Jones and other Democrats have been warning Bragg, don't do this. You're going to hurt the rest of us who think we've got something more legitimate on him.
Yeah, Van
this
Jones,
is
I
not
think,
going to go
right.
well. Yeah.
Van Jones had it right. I mean, I don't agree with Van Jones on much. He's a pretty smart guy. I don't agree with him on much, but he's right about this. This is going to make everything else, it's going to cheapen everything else that they're trying to do. Not that it's not already cheap, but I mean, just setting aside, the potential for substantial challenges to Trump, legal challenges to Trump, really are in Washington, D.C. and Fulton County, Georgia. They are not in New York City and never have been. And even Cy Vance, who was the guy who started this whole thing, was on NBC, was talking to Chuck Todd saying, well, I'm not sure about this. Well, I don't know. I haven't seen the indictment. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. And Chuck Todd says, is this airtight? And he goes, well, I don't know if it's airtight. It's like, yeah. And he was the guy running this investigation for a couple of years prior to Bragg taking office. And Vance never pulled the trigger on this, and for good reason, I think. I think Vance was looking at this going, this is probably not it.
Speaking of Chuck Todd, Ed Morrissey at Hot Air, he's the managing editor at Hot Air, Ed Morrissey is. Chuck Todd said on Sunday's Meet the Press, he said that the only thing galvanizing Republican voters right now are the social issues. Stuff like LGBTQ, trans stuff, book bans. It's the social issues. So we're back to that again. And I find that just amazing that that's their take. They want to take us back to 1990-something where we're debating gay marriage or something. That's not what this is. I would argue that everything culturally is being foisted upon the country. They're stoking the debate and then forcing reaction and making it sound as though the Republican case that's being made out there is only on social issues, as though the economy, as though crime, as though China and Russia aren't on our minds. It's only the trans stuff.
Energy policy.
Yes.
We are talking about a broad range of things. Chuck Todd might not be paying a lot of attention to it, but we're talking about a broad range of things. It may not get the media's attention because the media has its own agenda in these things. I mean, the media is awful these days, and they're worse than ever these days. And so all they're talking about with Ron DeSantis is don't say gay, which is a complete lie. There's nothing in the bill, the Parental Rights and Education Act, that said you can't say gay. It said, when you're talking to, K through 4 students, elementary school students, they don't want discussions of gender ideology, and for good reason. It's inappropriate for kids of that age, and that's what the parents want. It's very popular in Florida. And in fact, that law, when it's polled other places, it's very popular everywhere. Parents everywhere like that law. And so they're constantly lying about this stuff. They're constantly focusing on it. And they're constantly providing provocations. My friend Adam Baldwin calls them mid-level provocations. Drag shows involving elementary school children are basically mid-level provocations. They're trying to get a rise out of people so they can say, you guys are so intolerant. That's that's the intent of all that. And so that Chuck Todd can sit up there and go, well, all Republicans care about is LGBTQ plus issues. Well, no, it's not. But those are important. And the fact that you're erasing women through transgenderism is a very important issue with women.
Ed Morrissey's at Hot Air, and he has written a piece. None of this is why he came, but I love picking Ed's brain, fun. So God bless you. What piqued my interest, and to my knowledge, if you're not leading on this, you may be one of the only people writing about it at all, period, and it's a huge story. Did Twitter's algorithm have a backdoor for government censors? I have not read this, not your piece. There's another piece out there, and I asked you about it before the segment began because I didn't want to put you on the spot. It's like 51 pages. It's a heavy lift and a long read. It's at something called tabletmag.com, which I had not heard of before. Joel Stigall's the guy that wrote it. It's called A Guide to Understanding the Hoax of the Century. And what I've grazed in it is pretty profound, and I think it dovetails nicely with the piece you've written, which is basically our government has been organized to control information. And it follows this model where Democrats impose their worldview using our agencies to dictate narratives to a compliant news media and social media. What you've written today, did Twitter's algorithm have a backdoor to government censors? I mean, more than confirms that. And it's actually, it's worse in many ways because it almost sounds like now they didn't have to collude with Twitter. They just went right to Twitter and did it themselves.
Yeah, it's not clear from the code whether or not they had a backdoor themselves or they still had to work through Twitter employees. But it's very clear that the interventions were so common that they had to build code around it. And I think that's really a huge takeaway. And it was called something like government intervention. There was a tag for it. Government was in the tag for it in the code. It was basically a code built for Twitter, either government employees to use or Twitter employees to use under the direction of the government. And so, I mean, this was not like a one account at a time thing. This was a code level intervention that was going on with the government. The other part of that, though, is how they built the algorithm to punish people, wildly imbalanced penalties for things like mutes and blocks and especially reports. A like would give you a 0.5 point positive addition to your reputational score within Twitter. A report would give you a minus 369. So that's a minus 738 ratio, right, for a like to a complaint or report. And I've been on block lists, and I used to think that these were just kind of amusing little snowflakey things that were relatively harmless, where people I'd never even interacted with, Chris, had me blocked for some reason, and I could never figure out, why they had blocked me. And I found out about block lists. It's like, oh, these things are getting passed around by liberal activists. You just block all these people on this list. And I thought, well, that's really stupid, but it's harmless. Well, it's not harmless. All of those blocks basically denigrate your standing with your account standing within Twitter. And when you have coordinated complaint actions against people, where you organize people to do all sorts of complaints, you're racking up hundreds and hundreds and thousands of negative, demerits on your account, to where your stuff basically gets buried and nobody ever sees it again because the Twitter code suppresses it. And that's built right into it. And Stephen Tay is the guy who discovered this. He's the guy who went through the code and found this. And he says basically you're screwed. and yes, that is the shadow banning. I don't know if there's other tools in there for Twitter employees to directly shadow ban you, but that's the shadow ban code. And conservatives have been talking about it for years. Executives at Twitter got up in Congress and said, we don't shadow ban people. We don't shadow ban people. Yes, they do. That's the code. That's how it works. And liberal activists or progressive activists found out about it, started doing these block lists and report campaigns, and that's how they got conservative accounts muted, dialed down, and suppressed.
Do you have reason to believe, I know we can't know because only Elon Musk is the reason that we talk about this today, that
right.
Mark Zuckerberg and the Meta people behind Facebook and Instagram do something similar? I mean, do we have reason to believe they do? Probably.
Well, I don't know if we have reason to believe, but I mean, we've already found out that they were working with the same, government censorship efforts over at Facebook and Meta, and Google has as well. My guess is, yes, they've got similar sort of, social credit score. This is like the China thing, right? It's a social credit system. They probably got similar social credit systems on their platforms as well, and they probably work in very similar ways.
This is a more philosophical question to close out, Ed Morrissey, but when you have so many people in media, social media, traditional media, that are willing to just adhere to whatever the government asks of them rather than challenge it or question it, I don't know how much longer, and I don't mean it as a rhetorical thing. How much longer is it before the government starts to expect and or demand media do as they wish? Dictatorships demand media behave a certain way. Ours are voluntarily complying, and it's chilling. I don't know how you unwind it. Do we recover from this?
It really started with Congress when they were hauling all these social media people up on Capitol Hill and demanding that they impose, this is in 2016, right? In 2017, demanding that they impose controls on misinformation, right? That was a big thing. Misinformation, because it's Russia-generated misinformation. You have to control it. You put enough political pressure on people like that, people who are already politically connected, and that's what you get. And so, we can talk about the executive branch, but really, it's kind of started with Congress, and that's a big problem. And frankly, so is the bill to ban TikTok, because it doesn't just ban TikTok. It basically gives the federal government the authority to ban any sort of platform that they find I forget what the word is, but dangerous. And so Rand Paul, somebody who I don't necessarily agree with an awful lot, is correct on this. This is way too broad. It's far too dangerous. This bill is far too dangerous in its present form. And I
typically find, when guys like Rand Paul start standing out by themselves and saying, "Hey, don't do this," I'm listening now more than I ever have to Rand Paul. That's for sure.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with you, Chris.
Ed Morrissey is the managing editor at hotair.com. He's at Ed Morrissey on Twitter, if you can find him, and he's not shadow banned. Ed, it's always a pleasure to catch up, my friend. Thank you so much. Jason Perrett, he is the founder and financial advisor at Eagle Wealth Planning. He's a friend of mine, and he has a passion for getting you on proper financial footing. I don't know if you have a financial advisor. If you don't, I'd strongly urge you to make Jason yours. And you can be anywhere in the country. You don't have to be where Jason is. Jason can deal with you right over Zoom or right over the phone. He's fantastic because he focuses on producing consistent results for his clients based on their unique financial goals. His main objective is just to help you pursue your goal wherever you happen to be. Because he's a fiduciary, he's dedicated to providing clients with complete wealth management and investment services, and he constantly revisits the goals as well. He's not trying to upsell you. Jason can accomplish just about anything you need financially and keep you on track, whether you're a really advanced entrepreneur, whether you're a young person just starting out and you have no real plan at all and you need one, professionals, retirees. Maybe you're thinking about, now that I am retired, I want to make sure all my money's in proper order. Let Jason help you get it in order. Jason regularly revisits your goals, assesses your risk tolerance so that you really approach it as a team, and he helps keep you on track. That's a big part of having somebody as a partner like Jason at Eagle Wealth Planning. I hope you'll reach out. 816-394-8117. 816-394-8117. You can reach out to him through email as well, jason@eaglewealthplanning.com. His website is linked on mine at chrisstigall.com. Get together with Jason. Have a conversation with him. Tell him where you are. Maybe plan out a new path forward for your finances with Jason Perrett, a financial advisor at Eagle Wealth Planning. We thank Jason for his sponsorship. Securities and advisory services offered through Cetera Advisors, LLC, member FINRA SIPC, a broker-dealer, and a registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity. Steve Doocy was just conducting an interview with someone on Fox and Friends that looks exactly like Steve Doocy. It was the weirdest thing. I looked up and I was like, you know how the sitcoms used to do, like back in the 80s, the cheap kind of split screen thing where they would dress the character up as, like, it was usually late in the show when they were trying to inspire new storylines. And so they would do something crazy like the main character of the sitcom's long-lost cousin would show up and looked just like the sitcom character. And they would do the crude split screen. And, like they'd put glasses on the cousin. It's the main actor acting as another character. And they do a crude split screen. That's exactly what Steve Doocy is interviewing a man without glasses as Steve wears the glasses, and literally the only thing that looks different about the two of them is that Steve is wearing glasses. It looks like he's interviewing his evil twin, Stan Doocy. Does it not, Fast Eddie?
It's perfect.
It looks like the same man. It's like Steve Doocy is interviewing himself without glasses. It's really weird. You got to look at the picture. I just put it up at Twitter. Colonel Kurt Schlichter. I can think of no one I'd rather speak to. Boy, we got a chock-a-block hour, by the way, coming up. Dr. Sebastian Gorka coming up with his analysis at the bottom of the hour. But we kick off the hour with Colonel Kurt Schlichter. Colonel, ahoy!
Ahoy, and I want to thank you for getting me up at 5 a.m. so I can listen to a whole segment on the Parent Trap. Thanks. This is great. I mean, it's like freaking Ozark 30. There's werewolves around. And you're like, you know what's weird? Steve Ducey was interviewing a guy who looks like Steve Ducey.
You got it? I'm telling you, do yourself a favor. Look at the picture and tell me I'm wrong. Thanks for waking up this morning, Colonel.
I'll get right on it.
All right. Now, listen.
I'm right on it.
Here's the
Get out of my way! Don't be between me and my iPad. I gotta check out Steve Ducey's interview subject. And I know another word. He's interviewing a guy who looks a lot like him. Wait, what? Yeah.
Are you? Did I invite you on the show to harass me? I don't. This is not starting out well. I'm starting to feel like you're Alvin Bragg. What is it? All right. Now,
Alvin Bragg looks like Alvin Bragg ate Alvin Bragg. Oh, my God. He ought to be selling shakes for McDonald's.
All right, Schlichter. Here's the thing. Again, it's almost stupid to ask, but from a purely legal perspective, I assume that you share everyone else who's sane's point of view. There is not a shred of legal credibility to what happened yesterday. True?
You know, I find it baffling that I am a well-known $1 million winning lawyer. People ask me for my legal opinion of this thing that's going on, and it has nothing to do with law.
Yes,
it has it has zero to do with law. This isn't a legal question. You know, to read the papers, which look like legal papers, but that's where the resemblance stops. It's just, I mean, the whole thing is silly. It's ridiculous. It's it is to law what bulwark staffers are to satisfying their wives. It's just not a thing.
Do you believe? Here's what some on the left have been hoping for. Not Bragg. In fact, some of them, if they're honest, are irritated at Bragg because they think he screwed up the momentum for the real juice, which they think comes out of Florida and out of D.C. What do you think of those looming things coming from a legal perspective?
I think the whole thing. Are you familiar with the Bible and the story of Onan?
Refresh us. I don't know that I'm familiar with that particular story.
He's the guy who pleasured himself, and that's what this is.
Yeah.
They're going to enjoy it for a short time, but it lacks dignity and meaning.
So you would say that what they're suggesting coming out of Fulton County, Georgia, is equally meritless based on what you read?
Yeah, the whole thing's stupid, and everybody knows it's stupid. Yeah. And I think the Republicans, I keep saying, but this is going to damage the rule of law. Well, if you're at the point where you think the rule of law was pretty healthy, and then Alvin Bragg waddled out, look at and now he's done the rule of law, and I think you need to know what time it is. Okay, it's we are down a very bad road, and the only way to get to turn around is to understand that these norms and principles and rules and things are gone, and begin playing by the rules and norms and principles that exist. But we would sort of get rid of the rule of law. The court didn't uphold. No, there's nothing to uphold. It's weekends. They're playing weekend Bernies with the country we used to be.
I was reminded this morning by a guy on Twitter, Joe Biden was in the Oval Office with Obama when they coordinated a spying operation on Trump the first time, FBI, DOJ, CIA. back in 2016. And he asks, so is anybody really surprised the guy who was involved with that is now trying to imprison Trump before the 2024 election? God forbid they accomplish it, but I mean, do you think that's where they're trying to go, full-blown imprisonment, or do you think they want him? They want him to be the nominee, and they know damn good and well that this is going to galvanize a base of support around him that will make it so, because they think him the most easily beaten. Or are they thinking that deeply, or do they really want him jailed, or what do you think they want?
I think it's poorly thought through. First of all, of course they want him in prison. They want all of us in prison.
Yes.
Disenfranchised, disarmed, and in many cases dead. But I think to some extent they would be happy to have him the nominee. I don't know if that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Obviously, he's going to get a big bounce about this as people rally around him. But, people are like, well, that's it. Primary's over. Iowa's not for freaking 11 months.
Right.
And, I think it's a little bit early to be counting out Big Ron. Not to mention Asa Hutchinson.
Are you feeling the Hutch fever?
Yeah, I'm feeling Hutch fever. Him and his running mate Zebediah.
Gonna kick your Asa.
I could be in charge of is the chuck wagon on a cattle drive. His slogan's going to be "By Cracky, Asa."
By Cracky,
Asa. My name's Asa. Why? I'm going to be interviewed by Steve Ducey and Steve Ducey.
If you don't,
I'm Asa Hutchinson.
If you don't make Asa Hutchinson 2024 By Cracky shirts, I'm going to, and I'm stealing it outright.
By Cracky. Oh my God. My name's Asa. Of course it is. Want some beans? Got them in the skillet.
Want some beans? That's
my name's Asa. By Cracky.
Oh, Asa.
Want anything to do with Prospector Dam? Great. President Gaddy Hayes in the house. My name's Asa.
By Cracky has to be on a shirt. You have inspired me for days and days to come. Okay, I do it. The one thing I want to ask you about is this judge basically telling Trump he'd better not get out of line in his public comments. So given that and what he said last night, that was obviously some of the most carefully scripted and focused Trump we ever see. I mean, they clearly told Trump, stick to your script, and he did. So what of this judge kind of warning him about his future speech?
That would be the judge who's a Democratic donor and activist, and whose daughter worked on the Kamala Harris campaign. That judge?
Mm-hmm.
That one.
Yeah.
The one who,
I mean, one friend of mine said he should almost goad this judge, almost dare this judge to jail him for his speech. I don't know if you'd recommend that as an attorney. But
at the end of it, what's the judge going to do? If you're uppity, I'm not going to rule fairly on your motions or handle the trial fairly. Oh no! I don't want to turn the guy who's already given money to my opponents against me. By Cracky,
Asa Hutchinson there. Now, do you think that this guy? I heard some people say this judge should just dismiss this at once. I guess that window's already closed. He's not going to do that, or he still could.
Yeah, but again. You're attempting to apply legal standards to something that's not a legal case.
Yeah.
It's not a legal matter. So all the rules are he should he will have a chance to have the pleadings considered and a ruling. No, none of that's a thing.
Yeah.
Well, he'll have a jury of 12 citizens from one of the most democratic districts in America who all hate him. And, along with the judge who gives money to his opponents, he has as much chance of a fair trial as Asa Hutchinson winning the nomination. By Cracky.
By Cracky. So walk this out ultimately. I mean, whether you think Trump's going to be the nominee or not, this thing drags on clear through 2024, right? And this is just one of three.
That's the other thing I don't understand. The next hearing sometime in December. I'm not sure. As I understand it, New York has a very tough speedy trial law. And I don't know, unless there's a good reason. If I was his lawyer, I'd say, hey, we do not waive our speedy trial rights. I want a trial within the statutory period. Don't set this out there. You take me to trial. And I would also have, I would have had my legal team getting the motion to dismiss ready, and then a motion to change venue, and a motion to disqualify the judge. And I'd file them all, lose, appeal them, but I'd make them have the trial as soon as humanly possible. The first minute you can. No waiting time. I want my trial.
How does this work? Again, I understand not applying, legal standards because none of this is legal, but two more indictments are apparently maybe on deck with the Fulton County thing and the Washington, D.C. thing. Can other prosecutors bring indictments while he's under indictment in New York?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sure, and they all will, and it's all a joke. It's designed to interfere with the election because all this stuff about democracy and protecting our freedom and stuff, it's all a lie and a scam. And I don't propose doing what they're doing, which is essentially framing him, trying to convict him of a crime that he didn't commit, because what he did isn't a crime. We, for a long time, had a presumption that you kind of stay away from using the legal system to investigate your political enemies, even when it's pretty obvious. When Nancy Pelosi's stock picks are just amazing. Like she's some sort of MIT, computer quant scientist, picking the right bonds and equities, and she's done really well. Not insider trading. She's just super smart.
Yeah.
When it's real obvious like that, we're like, well, we don't want to dig into that. I think that's something we should dig into. I think red state governors need to start turning the investigative light on the Democrats within them. Many of them have big blue cities inside their borders where there are antics, and I think a lot of it, like in Missouri, Cori Bush.
Yep.
You think she's clean in Missouri? Oh, she's not. She's a racist idiot, and she was involved with Black Lives Matter, which is a totally corrupt organization. I think the Missouri Attorney General should look into it. But it's a crime. I know we're not doing that anymore.
The president,
we're looking into our political opponents to find problems. Because that's the new rule, and I hope you enjoy the suppository it is.
The president of El Salvador tweeted yesterday, think what you want about former President Trump and the reasons he's being indicted, but just imagine if this happened in any other country where a government arrested the main opposition candidate. The United States' ability to use democracy as foreign policy is gone. I'm sorry to say the president of El Salvador is not wrong.
Literally a banana republic.
Yeah.
Is making fun of us.
Yeah.
We're now the United States of Chiquita. Our president should be Carmen Miranda. No, literally a banana republic is messing with us.
Yeah.
About being a banana republic. They're like, you guys are upsetting us.
Yeah.
We think you're scummy.
Would you please look at that picture that I posted on Twitter? It's Steve Doocy interviewing a guy that looks exactly like him.
That is my next step.
Ahoy.
As soon as we hang up, I'm looking at Steve Doocy, talking to Steve Doocy.
You'll enjoy it and thank me later. I expect a note in the mail.
Videos.
Handwritten, too.
I like the Doocy videos.
I want a handwritten note, not an email. I want a handwritten note of thanks for the enjoyment. Bye, Cracky.
Well, dearest Chris, my heart longs for the sight of Steve Doocy interviewing Steve Doocy. And a little Ken Burns thing, little like folk music. Some guy with like a violin in the background.
All right, Gorka's going to get mad at me if I'm late. I got to go.
Oh, but for more Steve Ducey talk.
Ahoy, Colonel. Thanks for waking up this morning.
Well, thanks for having me to the Steve Ducey Morning Zoo.
You're welcome, my friend. Honk, honk, and auga to you.
Honk, honk.
It really is. The jingle is true. For the best night's sleep in the whole wide world, visit mypillow.com. I'm sleeping like a baby. I can't lie about it. I mean, I have this MyPillow body pillow I use every single night. Tuck it under the blankets, lay next to me. I know, not very romantic on Valentine's Day, but most of us that have been married and you're sleeping nightly, after a while, people sleep hot. I don't know about you. I get hot. I need space. But MyPillow, what's so great about MyPillow and their new MyPillow 2.0 technology is it's exactly for people that sleep hot. So I get this side sleeping thing where I just can't sleep on my back or my stomach. I like sleeping on the side. Maybe you do too. This body pillow they make, like it doesn't get hot, but it is so supportive. And it's like 3 feet long, so it's just perfect to lay your head on. You can tuck it in between your knees to take a little pressure off the lower back or the knees. I love it. Plus, I'm on these Giza Dream Sheets, which are crazy comfortable. We've got the towels, which are super absorbent. We dry off with every morning, thanks to MyPillow.com. My dog, Dean, is on the MyPillow bed for the dog. Loves it. And that's just some of the products. Right now, I'm sipping my coffee. Mike has his own line of coffee. I got the light brew. I think next time I'm going to order the dark brew and try that. But all of these products and so many more, from the robes to the slippers, Christine loves her MyPillow slippers. You got to check it out. And if you go to MyPillow.com and order today, you use my promo code ChrisPodcast. ChrisPodcast. That allows you to save up to 66% on everything on the website. And it also lets them know that you listen to the podcast, which means a lot to me. They're advertising with me in the hopes to reach you. I know you're going to love the products, but when you let them know Chris Podcast, it gets you the discount and lets them know you listen. So thanks for that. It's a three-legged stool. Hopefully everybody wins. So MyPillow.com, promo code Chris, or for the best customer service, you should know everything you order, 60-day money-back guarantee, a 10-year warranty. So they're really high-quality products and made here in the United States. So 800-932-5056 to order in person, 800-932-5056, or MyPillow.com, promo code Chris. He's senior economic contributor at FreedomWorks, former Trump economist. He's Stephen Moore on Twitter, Stephen Moore. Many people call you Stephen, besides like your mother when you were in trouble and maybe your wife when you're in trouble. Steve, good morning.
Good morning, Chris. Yeah, my mom when I was bad behavior, and my wife when I have bad behavior.
I've never called you Stephen in my life.
But it's a big day today.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I was just watching a little bit of Fox News before we came on, and I just have to say, are the progressive leftists, are they trying to make Trump the next president?
Here's what I tweeted this morning. No one is above the law, say Clinton and Biden voters without a hint of irony in their voice. I mean, it's really remarkable, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, I don't know the facts of any of this case. And maybe he did violate. Who knows? I don't know. I was going to say probably. We don't know. I don't know if he violated the campaign finance laws or not.
Well, the FEC already says he hasn't.
Okay. Well, who knows? But my point is, okay, so what? Give him a $3 million penalty, and let's get up. This charade is a three-ring circus, and it makes America look bad. And really, I mean, Trump is going to now dominate the news for the next. I don't know how long this is going to go on, but it's when I worked for Trump in 2016, I remember one time I was talking to him on the plane one time, and I just said, Donald, at the time he wasn't Mr. President, I said, Donald, why aren't you running TV ads? All the other candidates running TV ads. Did you know Trump never ran TV ads during the primary? And he said, Steve, I don't have to run TV ads. Turn on the TV. Whose picture do you see?
It's funny you say that. I was just
crowds out everybody else.
Yeah, I was just saying yesterday. It's so funny you bring that up. The left lost their ever-loving mind because Leslie Stahl and the 60 Minutes people put Marjorie Taylor Greene on their show Sunday. And I believe the reason they got so mad is because they learned in 2015 and 16 just what Trump said. I don't think they talked about him as a serious candidate. I don't think they treated him as serious. They just treated him as ratings catnip. But inadvertently, that's exactly what they did. They got him elected.
Yeah. There was an old saying back in 2016 that, the left always took Trump literally, but not seriously. And those of us who supported Trump took him seriously, but not literally. And I think there's a real, that explains a lot. But it really is such a miscarriage of justice what's going on. I was thinking about this. I couldn't sleep last night. I was thinking, these are the same people. When Trump was elected, I got this big contract to go over to CNN for the first 2 years of the Trump presidency. And so, I went on CNN, a lot because I was their one, pro-Trump. So I'd go on and there'd be like 5 anti-Trump people and me. And what always struck me about that was that that for the first 2 years, every night, what they talked about every single night for 2 years?
I'm sure something to do with the guy, right?
Russia.
Russia
Collusion hoax.
Yeah.
It turned out, ladies and gentlemen, to be a complete lie, science fiction, and they spent 2 years on that, defaming the president. Do you recall the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC ever apologizing to Trump for that?
Yeah, no, it's and again, it's that Hillary Clinton. Ed Morris and I were just talking about it a while ago. Like that Hillary Clinton in July of 2016, James Comey comes out and lays out the laundry list of things she did that are clearly felonious. And said, but she's a presidential candidate, and we just can't do that, and we don't think she meant to, so we're going to drop it all. I mean, it's just to see this today. It's again, I hate to, people always accuse me of whataboutism when I bring that up, but I mean, we can't just memory hole that stuff. It matters.
So the other thing is, and I do want to talk a little bit about economics, and I know you do too, but I want to make one other point, which is that, if you notice that the left can't get past Trump. He hasn't been president for 2 years. If they really wanted to, just, what Trump would hate if they just ignored him, but they can't. They can't bring that themselves to do that, and so he will now be in the spotlight. And for the other candidates, and I am not picking a winner. I'm remaining neutral in the Republican primary. I mean, I have a personal affection for Trump, but I want to see what DeSantis has to say. I want to see what Nikki Haley has to say. I want to see them all. But they are almost making it impossible for any of these other Republicans to, get any kind of notice. Now, I want to shift that if I could, because there's something else that's going on right now that's important in terms of the economic news, which is, as you saw, Chris, yesterday, in the last couple of days, the price of oil rose by another $5 to $6 a barrel. So just finally, we were turning the corner on inflation with energy prices coming down, and all of a sudden the Saudis call for 1 million barrel reduction. And of course, when you reduce the supply of something, its price goes up. So we're now headed, back to potentially $4 a gallon gasoline. And that means inflation is going to, start to spike again. Now, why is this important? Because when Trump was president, we did a study a few months ago at the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. If Biden had just come in and just left the policy in place, Trump's energy policy, we would be producing 2 to 3 million more barrels a day, Chris. So we wouldn't have to worry about what the Saudi Arabians do and the OPEC countries do. In fact, do you recall us ever talking about OPEC when Trump was president?
No. In fact, we didn't need them.
We have a cartel. Yeah, when the United States is producing, we were producing, I think, around 12 million barrels a day. And so this is another self-inflicted wound, folks. The way you destroy a cartel is to produce more at home. We stopped doing that, and that's why the Saudis and the Iranians and the other, OPEC countries can try to strangle us. And it's frustrating to me because they should not have that power, and they wouldn't if we just drill, baby, drill here in the United States of America.
Joe Biden in Minnesota, one of your favorite. He says this a lot. We love to call him out when he says it. Number 43 here, Fast Eddie.
I cut the deficit over 2 years by $1.7 trillion, more than any president has in the history of the United States of America.
He loves to say that. And you respond.
Yeah, like I don't think anybody really believes that. I hope no one does. I mean, we had COVID, obviously, so we had to borrow. We shut down the U.S. economy for 9 months in 2020, which was a huge, huge mistake. So, the only way the economy continued to function, since all private businesses or most of them were shut down, was you just flushed the economy with money. Obviously, that was it was a one-time only expenditure, and we should be now running a surplus, actually, to be paying for all that money we had to spend during COVID. And so, yet we're still borrowing $1.5 to $2 trillion a year. Biden has increased the debt in 2 years by $6 trillion, an all-time record. So what the hell is he talking about, Chris?
By the way, I think I saw a story today. I had it somewhere in my stack, and I was going to talk to you about it, and I don't seem to have it. But it was yes, here it is. Why aren't governors using millions in COVID funds for students? The lingering impact of COVID school closures for 55 million Americans is clear. They're scholastically compromised, prone to higher levels of anxiety, and their futures are uncertain. Consulting firm confirms all this, blah, blah, blah. So back in the COVID early days, the federal government approved $200 billion in school-aged assistance across 3 bills in 2020 and 2021, but a deep dive into the data around those bills reveal huge chunks of the funds have failed to reach kids most in need. After months of public records requests and poring over government documents, we identified at least $736 million in federal funding that has yet to reach K-12 schools and students through the Emergency Assistance for Non-Public School programs. So not a surprise here. Let's see. Late 2020 doled out $5.5 billion of that $200 billion to independent private schools, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, this is the New York Post reporting that most of the money that was sent to the states has not reached the schools for COVID emergency. Surprised?
I'm not really sure what that all means, frankly, because we spent, what we did during COVID was we shut down the schools. And then we gave them more money. And it's like, wait a minute, why are we giving them more money when there's padlocks on the door? And that never made any sense to me, And I wrote a column 2 years ago saying, you know what, every single county in America should be sending a refund check to their ratepayers. Like I live in Montgomery County, Maryland. We pay $2,000 a month or something like that in property taxes, mostly for the schools. Well, you shut down the schools. So don't you think, Chris, they should have just sent me a refund check?
Sure.
We didn't provide you the service, and they never did that. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to just shift a little bit on this with respect to schools, because the big story that is going on with schools around the country, Chris, is the school choice movement.
Oh, it's huge.
Movement, which is amazing. I've been calling the school choice moment, as you know, because I know you're a regular reader of the hotline. We've had school choice now, universal school choice, so parents can send their kids to any school they want. In West Virginia, Arizona, Florida, Ron DeSantis just passed the most sweeping school choice bill in the country, meaning you could send your kid to your public school, any public school. You can send to a Catholic school, a Jewish school, a Montessori school, an art school, whatever is the best for your kid. We're making big ground in Texas. I think that Greg will sign a bill this year. So why not Pennsylvania? Why isn't Pennsylvania on that? In Philadelphia, you have some of the worst schools in America.
Yep.
Why can't you let kids out? By the way, most of them who are being victimized by these rotten schools are minorities. I've always said the most important civil rights issue of our time is letting kids out of failing public schools, and you won't do that in Pennsylvania.
No, and most states won't. I mean, sadly, only 6 states have done it. It's just common sense. There shouldn't be a red state governor and a red legislature in the country that's not doing this. Sadly, there are.
Well, we're
still
moving
too many.
quickly. I think we're going to get South Carolina. I think we're going to, as I said, Texas. I think we've got a good chance in Oklahoma. And you're right. What's going to happen in the next couple of years is virtually all the red states will have school choice. That is giving parents the money so they can send their kids to whatever school they think is best for their kid. And then the blue states are going to have these schools that just don't perform. I mentioned Philadelphia. As you know, I'm from Chicago, Chris.
Yep.
We have a big election today. And one of the candidates is basically just a fully owned subsidiary of the teachers union. You think he's going to reform the public schools if he wins? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So this is really the issue of our time, is fixing our schools. I saw a statistic the other day that the average SAT score for your Philadelphia public school teachers is 850. How can you teach reading or math when you can't even do it yourself?
Yeah, they just need warm bodies now, Steve Moore. Yesterday, there was a report from Reuters that said Social Security will run out a year earlier than projected now. 2033, Social Security will go broke. What do you say about that?
Yeah, well, when you don't have enough people working, when you pay people not to work, when you have an economy that's barely trudging along, you don't get the tax revenues necessary to run the system. So, yeah, our national pension system is going broke, and it's because we're not, we don't have enough workers. And by the way, I'm a baby boomer. I'm 63 now. There's 80 million of us. When we start retiring, where do you think the money's going to come from to pay our benefits? Because they spent it. What? I know we're out of time, but quickly, can you imagine if you ran a private business, Chris, and you had a pension program, and you were running short of money for your business, so you raided the pension fund to pay your bills?
Right.
They would put you in jail.
They sure would.
That's what Congress has been doing for 30 years.
Seriously, what do you think they ultimately do there? I mean, so I'm, in theory, on paper, I'm 20 years away from 65 or 20 years away, 67 or whatever you can start legally collecting. I'm operating under the assumption it won't be there. But what do you think in 20 years? Will a guy like me, seriously, will you see, or I don't know, my kids at 18, will Social Security be a thing, do you think?
Well, we should have. I've been an advocate of this policy change for 25 to 30 years. Starting tomorrow, every young person in America should be, instead of sending it into the black dark hole of Social Security, just put the money into a 401k type of a plan. Mm-hmm. If you did that, if you had done that, I don't know how old you are. Let's say you've been working for 25, 30 years. You'd be getting a benefit 2 to 3 times higher than Social Security.
Yep.
We have to move towards a system of personal accounts where people actually, you take 10% of your paycheck each month from the time you start working at age, say, 21 or 22, and you put it into a 401k plan, you're going to retire a pension millionaire.
Yep.
So why don't we do that?
Steve Moore, our chief economist. Every week we check in with him. I appreciate your time as always, Steve-O. Thank you.
Our currency is crashing and will soon no longer be the world standard, which will be our greatest defeat, frankly, in 200 years. There will be no defeat like that. That will take us away from being even a great power. If you took the 5 worst presidents in the history of the United States and added them up, they would not have done near the destruction to our country as Joe Biden and the Biden administration have done.
It's exactly right. Sebastian Gorka, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Stigall.
I don't know if you've spoken with anyone inside Team Trump. It looked like he had most of his family and closest friends down there. I know you're a busy man, or you would have been down there yourself. How did he adjudicate himself last night? What did you make of that event last night? I noticed it was very focused. He stayed on script. He didn't stray, which he often does, kind of like the riff, but he didn't last night. What do you make of what he did last night?
Yeah, so I know his speechwriters. They were colleagues of mine in the White House, and I've been telling them for years, guys, the funnest part, you are great speechwriters, but the funnest part is when the president goes off teleprompter and riffs, and he likes to do that for about a third of the time. So stop writing him hour-long speeches, because then that ends up as a 90-minute speech. And yesterday, I guess finally they started listening to me. Yesterday, I think it was 27, 28 minutes long. That was exactly what we needed. It wasn't – he had every right. I had the great presidential historian Lord Conrad Black on my show yesterday, who has gone through the judicial mill himself. And he said, I asked him, what do you expect tonight? And he said, well, President Trump has every right to come out fuming, angry, and blistering for what they've done to him. But he shouldn't. And he didn't. He was calm. He spoke to the American people, saying basically the argument that he needs to say for the next 21 months, look, it's not about me, it's about you, I'm just in the way, and giving us a vision of, his role as the 47th president. So I was very, very satisfied, Chris, with yesterday.
I know he wasn't sincere when he said it. When Van Jones described yesterday on CNN that kind of trying to pretend he was human for half a second, even though he's a communist, saying that Trump looked sad, and as a grandfather, he felt this is a sad moment. It was sad. I don't know Donald Trump personally. You do. I don't know if he was sad, but I can't imagine you would feel anything but sad. I mean, there's nothing criminal here. This is a terrible abuse like we've never seen in America. It is sad. I don't think any of them sincerely meant it on the left, but it's awfully sad.
Yeah, I was a little bit schizophrenic on this issue yesterday because historically it was very sad. Why? Because as I wrote in the American Spectator yesterday afternoon, there's no going back from this. This is truly a police state tactics. As the son of a man who was imprisoned by the communists at the age of 20 and given a life sentence and spent 6 years in a communist prison until he was liberated by the freedom fighters of 1956. I never thought I'd say in America that we have political prisoners. We do. They're called the January 6th prisoners. I never thought we'd have a pro-life pastor's house raided on a formally dismissed misdemeanor by FBI agents as his 7 children were screaming. And we did. That happened in Philly, as you know. And I never thought we'd see a president treated as such simply because he's the current leader of the opposition. So in historic terms, strategic terms, I'm truly saddened. However, look, I'm partisan. I'm a conservative. I'm the former deputy assistant to President Trump. We need him back into the White House. And I think yesterday, millions of people, Chris, who aren't political, who aren't Trump supporters, said, this is wrong, and I'm on Team Trump. So, at a tactical level, I was actually happy because I think this is the dumbest thing the Democrats have done in a long time.
And do you anticipate then that Fulton County, Georgia will follow suit and D.C. will follow suit? I mean, could this be a thrice indicted, much like he's a twice impeached? I mean, are they just going to throw everything but the kitchen sink, or are they going to let this thing play out? How do you see it going?
That's a great question. Before yesterday, I probably would have said yes, given the fact that, even the BBC and even, CNN commentators are saying, yesterday was really, really thin. They may think twice. But look, again, we're being rational. We're the rational guys.
Yeah.
They're not rational. They are driven by one thing. Utter bile-filled hatred. So if you've lost all common sense, you might just go all the way. So, Chris, it's absolutely possible.
Dr. Sebastian Gorka with us, America First this afternoon, each and every day, coast to coast. You said something important, and I don't disagree. It now makes people look at Donald Trump, maybe that didn't before, and understand that this is so overtly political and such a railroad job. There's no love lost for Joe Biden. I mean, even if they're not fond of Trump, they certainly aren't excited about Biden. So you could see this pushing people to Trump. And I guess out of curiosity, are you worried still, because we've talked a lot about this, that no matter who the nominee is, I know sometimes people get wrapped around the axle on the Trump-DeSantis thing, but before we even get there, I'm still concerned when I see things like Wisconsin last night, Seb.
Yeah.
Out-organized again. I still don't feel like the party knows how to organize itself, Seb.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you raised this. This is the real issue. So President Trump loves America. He's the only guy who could really drain the swamp. Every other politician, Ron DeSantis included, is going to want to be reelected for a second term. President Trump can't be reelected. This is his only second term he could have. So he'd come to this stinking city and he could just use a flamethrower on the whole city. That's why I'm supporting him. But we have to get him elected, and this is the real problem. Rona Romney McDaniel, I don't know. I saw her on Newsmax yesterday. I don't know what she's done to her face. She looks awful. I guess shares in Botox have risen, but the disaster really is the RNC. We knew they were going to steal the election when they were mailing out 81 million ballots. You have to be organized. President Trump warned us. And then when you find out in Arizona in the midterms, the GOP that are running the election didn't have the backup printer cartridges to print the ballots. You just have to say, what is this clown show? So, it's not just about having the right candidate. The machinery has to be put in place to make sure we out-organize them. President Trump said it regrettably. He said, in those states where we can't stop ballot harvesting, we have to out-ballot harvest the DNC. And I just don't trust Ronna Romney McDaniel to out-organize anything except maybe her next visit to the plastic surgeon.
You're a tremendous student of history and international diplomacy, and one of the things that's very noticeable is how foreign countries are watching this. Yeah. And people like for heaven's sakes, when El Salvador's president is on Twitter mocking this and saying, don't you ever run around the country and lecture us about democracy again after what you've done here with Trump. I mean, he's got a point, I hate to say.
Yeah, look, it's the pointing a finger at us and laughing. It's Xi Jinping and Putin saying you have now descended to the gutter where we are, and all tactics are permissible. That's the obvious consequence, but there's a much deeper one. America is different. America is the only nation on God's green earth that is founded on the principle of the equality of man based upon the fact that we are made in the image of our Creator. No other nation has that in their constitution. Unalienable rights because God made us. We are supposed to be, as Reagan reminded us, the shining city on the hill, with all the imperfections that come with that, but we are supposed to be the beacon to others. It's very hard, Chris, to be a beacon to others after yesterday and after what Alvin Bragg did.
So if you were to, it's almost impossible because there's so much time between now and then. Odds on now, I think conventional wisdom holds that all this has done now is accelerate Trump's nomination for the Republican Party. So given that and moving ahead to a head-to-head presidential, there are people that don't pay as close attention to us as my wife had friends texting her yesterday, who are Trump voters or, Republicans anyway, who genuinely believe this is disqualifying. That, maybe we're talking about jail and he can't win because of it. So what would you say to people that think, well, this is it. They've taken him out. He can't win. Now he certainly can't win with all this air of alleged criminality around him. You would say what?
I would say put two things. One little nuanced, one very simple. In a court of law, there's something called a fact pattern. What is the fact pattern for the treatment of President Trump in the last 7 years? I made a graphic up for my Newsmax show, and we actually used it last night as we were doing the response to the speech. I call it the fact pattern of presidential persecution. Whether it starts with Operation Crossfire Hurricane, the first time ever in history that 3 intelligence agencies worked together to undermine a presidential election. That's the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA. Whether it's the Mueller probe, where a former FBI director worked for 20 months to the cost of $40 million to try and prove Russian collusion, failed. Whether it's impeachment 1, whether it's impeachment 2, whether it's the armed raid of his home in Mar-a-Lago, whether it's the January 6th committee, or whether it's Alvin Bragg. What does that show you? That fact pattern is this is the most investigated and persecuted man in American, if not world history, outside of our Lord and Savior. So number one, understand what is happening here in the broader context. And number two, if you're a conservative, ask yourself this question. Who better to have as president than the man the establishment and the left most wants to destroy? I had a saying when we were in the White House, when the Washington Post and the New York Times and CNN were attacking you viciously, I said, congratulations. As the Air Force says, you're only taking flak when you're over the target. If you understand metrics, what happened yesterday is the best metric possible to prove there is nobody they are more afraid of in the establishment than Donald Trump, and that is why he deserves your support.
He's Dr. Sebastian Gorka, and you can hear him every day. By the way, the Newsmax show is weekly, just so I'm clear.
Yeah, Sunday night, the Gorka reality check.
Yeah, and if you haven't watched it yet, you should do so.
I was just guest hosting yesterday's special coverage.
I was going to say, you work like a fiend, man. When you said you were on Newsmax last night, I thought, oh no, has he stepped up? Okay, so Sunday is Gorka's reality check.
At
the Daily Show.
2 a.m. I was on British television as well. So after last night, so.
You did. I'm so sorry. Now I feel guilty that I woke you up. Although I bet before the Brits did. I bet I did.
Of course you did. You're efficient.
It was great to see you at CPAC, my friend. Boy, I tell you what, when Seb walks into a crowded room, you're already like 9 feet tall anyway. So it's not without saying a word, like everybody knows you the minute you walk in the room.
Yeah, CPAC is always the place where, as a conservative, as a lover of liberty in America, you just go to get your patriotic batteries recharged, and it's always so much fun.
It's great to see you, Seb. I appreciate you waking up or not sleeping, staying awake, or whatever the case was. Thank you for your analysis this morning, my friend. We'll listen to you this afternoon.
God bless you and the listeners.
The Chris Stigall Show podcast.